you will get a little privacy notice up here at the top. Have a read or just click dismiss. And I'd like to just call in our 3 guests for tonight. So first up is Kate Mcdade, who is CEO of Nutricate. She's involved with the Longford footballers for the last couple of years, the Dublin ladies footballers, and an Instagram sensation as well. So that's Kate Mcdade there. Second up is Simon Kavanagh, who is a head of performance analysis with Connacht Rugby at the minute. Simon, you will see him on TG Carr sitting to the left of Andy Friend. So once you see his picture here, you'll recognise him. Simon has worked with a lot of inter-county teams as well, mainly on the football context, but has been involved with club teams also. And then Tony Old Regan, who is a performance coach. Tony Old, you would have seen him on TG Carr, the same setting. I think he has his computer at a little slightly different angle. He was on the Sunday game there last week. And Tony Og is heavily involved in performance coaching with individual athletes, teams, has worked with both the Galway footballers and Roscommon or Tipperary hurlers in recent years. And Tony Og is also in the corporate world as well, with management and trying to get improved performance out of individuals. So that's our guests for tonight. Tony Og and Simon, you can turn your mics on. You can leave them on there if you like. And we're going to start with Kate. So firstly, Kate, thanks for joining us. I just want to start a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up? You're a true dub. We'll all hear it when you start to talk. So where did you grow up? A little bit about family, who's in that, and your early school years, please.
Yeah, thanks so much, Damien, for having me. And hopefully you enjoy the next hour or so with the 3 of us chatting away here. So my name's Kate Mcdade. Sorry, I don't know why this is an echo on mine. Like, I hope it's not the same with all of you. But so I am, as Damien mentioned. Oh, sorry. As Damien mentioned, I am a true dub. I grew up in Churchtown on the south side of Dublin with my mum, dad, brother and sister, and I actually have an older brother and sister as well. So big enough family. I suppose we were always encouraged to get into sports. So I went to an Irish primary school where football and camogie were the main jams there. And then when I went to secondary school, which again was an Irish, all Irish speaking school, Clushiscon, in Still Oregon, basketball was actually the main sport there. And that's kind of what I started playing. And I suppose I'd do anything to get out of class in secondary school. Didn't really like it. Like, I wasn't bad or anything in school, but I suppose when we got to 4th year, it was always a case of when basketball season ended, I'd start picking up a new sport just to get out of school. And then I followed a nutritionist for my undergrad, or not my undergrad, sorry, for as work experience in 4th year. And that was the first time where I was like, oh my God, this is so interesting. And oh my God, I've actually paid attention for an hour without getting sidetracked. So I suppose I was very fortunate that I knew what I wanted to do from a very young age. And that kind of got me to settle down in school. And I still continue to play sport competitively. I still actually do to this day. I'm playing away with basketball, and it's been a huge part of my life. So I try and combine what I do, work-wise, working with other athletes. I try and take, I suppose, my understanding as an athlete myself, and marry that with the research in and around nutrition and my own expertise at this point. So I actually don't know if I really answered your question properly, Damien, but I know you wanted some sort of an intro. So yeah, so that's kind of my background. I've set up my nutrition consultancy in Dublin. It's called Nutricate. So we work online and, in real life with people. Well, we did pre-COVID. So I've been doing that since 2017 and having studied in Loughborough University and having worked over in Loughborough in a clinic over there for a number of years prior to the start of the Nutricate. So that's my stuff. I hope it was sufficient.
And Kate, just going back to post-primary school, home economics. Had you been?
That actually was because we got to cook as well. So we were buzzing, particularly when you got to cook something nice like, chocolate cake or cookies or whatever the teacher would let you do. So yeah, home economics was probably my favorite from both, the information that was provided, and that we got the practical element of it. So you got to, do something a little bit different, like it was more practical, and you got to show, try different skills, I suppose, to your usual school academic side of things.
And when you were coming home to mum, were you taking over the kitchen?
My dad was the main chef now in our household, and my mum would kill me if she was logging on because she has her own stories of her own interpretation of who took that role. But dad actually was the one at home who'd be throwing stuff into the pot, and he always cooked up something delicious, and it was always from scratch. So I actually picked up a few bits from dad, and then obviously I knew from an athletic perspective that I had to pay attention to it. So I was then kind of giving dad the hip out of the kitchen when I needed to use it.
Great, thanks for that, Kate. We'll jump over to Simon for a couple of minutes. So very similar, Simon. Where did you grow up? Where were you born? And early school years?
Yeah, how's it going?
Bit of a freeze there, Simon.
Background, but Judge, you do fire away with Tony, Damien. Yeah. I'm going to move rooms here.
Lovely, thanks, Simon. Tony Og, you're under the pump.
Thanks, Damien. Hi, everyone, and thanks for having me on this evening. Damien, I suppose I grew up in a place called Bowley It's just on the outskirts of Galway City, kind of between Salthill and Rahun, and went to national school about 100 metres up the road. I suppose the earliest childhood memories is probably playing Gaelic football with Salthill Knocknacarra, and started my hurling career around 9 years of age at Rahun Newcastle, and graduated then into St Mary's Secondary School, an all-boys school, which was very much sports orientated. Lucky enough to have, I suppose, Sean Og as one of my teachers growing up, and Galway were in the boom of winning All Ireland in '98 and 2001, and having Sean Og as your teacher on a Monday morning. When they did win, you probably wouldn't see him, but when they did lose, he was in all right. But yeah, St Mary's was brilliant for me from a sports point of view. Liam Salmon was my PE teacher, one of the Galway 3-in-a-row team, a 66 as well. So you can imagine the great conversations we were having around the school at different times, and the great influences we had. And you had different people teaching in their times. Cathal Moore was in there as a H-dip teacher, and Jerry Dempsey, Galway hurling coach in 2005, was an economics teacher in there. Tom Nolan, who was on the Galway 87, 88 panels as well, was my maths teacher. So we had massive role models and massive influences from a sporting setting in St Mary's. And I suppose I kind of graduated then into the Galway Academy teams, the 14s, 16s minors during those periods and formative years, and things kind of went from there. And would have gone to college then in NUIG from there.
And Tony Og, just the hurling football, how did that play out? When did you start focusing on hurling?
Yeah, I can remember distinctly, Damien, at around 16, I was had to make the choice because I was asked into the Galway minor footballers for trials, and the Galway minor hurlers already had their trials, and I was probably down to the last 40 or 50. And I just felt there was no way I could keep this going, and I was actually very interested in the academic side of it. I liked to do well at school, and I took it fairly seriously, and I realised there wouldn't be any evening in the week if I was trying to combine the two that time and get a decent leaving cert. So at 16, I won my first All-Ireland minor at Galway, and I made the decision at the start of that year that hurling was my number one. And we probably started when you're on a Galway under 14 squad and get to an All-Ireland final at 14, and an under 16 All-Ireland at 15, that there was big things happening in the hurling scene, and football maybe wasn't as strong as underage. So they kind of made my decision at 16 a bit easier, that you're having that bit of county success early in your life.
Excellent, thanks, Tony. And then in secondary school and getting as far as the leaving cert and moving into college, what did you end up doing?
I leaned towards, I suppose, business and maths, and I did a commerce degree. My sister was a year or two ahead of me, and she was doing something similar. So I remember having a conversation with my dad, who was the director of sport in UCG at the time, and saying I was thinking of doing sports science in UL, and it was shot down fairly quickly. So I had to park that and come back to sports science probably about 10 years later. So I probably owe him a baiting for that or something along that lines. But I went in and done commerce for the 3 years there, and done a postgrad in economics. And listen, I was great influences in there. My dad coached me. Conor Hayes was my manager for Fitzgibbon campaign. Eamon O'Shea coached me in my first year in Fitzgibbon in there, training with the likes of David Tierney, who was in an All-Ireland final with Galway in 2001, and I was just in the door of college in 2002. Tony Griffin, the Clare All-Star. You know, you had lots of great hurlers. Gary Hannify from Offaly had won an All-Ireland. He was in there. And so you had a massive, exposure to inter-county players at 18, 19, and it really gave me, I suppose, a quick transition into senior inter-county and what it might look like.
Tony, you seem to have had a great balance of the academic and the sporting during both post-primary and college. Was that something that came easy for you, or did it take a lot of managing?
A lot of managing. I think when I played my first year minor, I was in fourth year, obviously, and I had no leaving cert, but I actually kind of was aware at that time that this is a massive commitment. And I can remember sitting down in September, starting my leaving cert year, and I know the Galway minors was coming early in January, February, and I'd done a huge bank of work from October to February, and nearly could have sat the leaving cert in February. I was so prepared for at that stage, and I was only skimming over things then for the next couple of months because I was just busy with training and trying to progress myself off the field. So study really took a back burner going into the leaving cert, and was really preparing for the minor campaign a lot of the time. And I felt I had the work done early in the year and I was ready to go for the leaving cert. So that's probably helped me balance things then, Damien, going on later out in life for college and professional exams as well, that I had that awareness at 16, 17 that you have to really prioritise your time and make commitments around what's important in your life at different times.
Tony, you were displaying a lot of skills there that you would be preaching in your current role. Did you realise back then the talent that you now have for what you're doing at the minute?
Not at all. I think I was very much focused on developing myself on the hurling field, but I wouldn't know a whole pile around sports psychology. It was never spoken about in any of the teams I was in at that age group, and even in college I wasn't really aware of it. First inkling of the importance of the mind was probably 16, preparing for my first All-Ireland final, Damien, and I just got a bolt of what I didn't know at the time was anxiety and panic and worry the whole week leading up to it. And I got into such knots over the game that I remember going up to Croke Park on the Sunday and I really didn't want to get off the bus and play the match. And it was one of the worst experiences I had going into a game ever, I thought at the time. And I couldn't wait for it to come over, and I was just a bag of nerves, and I just dreaded the whole game, and I didn't want to make a mistake and let anyone down. So I was one of those players that just played from behind and didn't attack the game or enjoy it at all. And even at the final whistle, I just broke down crying, and it was more relief that I hadn't let the team down. And I remember my dad trying to console me in the dressing room. So that probably gave me an inkling in that it wasn't just about, lifting a few weights or running around the pitch or doing the pitch sessions and you'd be grand and go out and perform. There was a whole other side to it that you had to maybe think about. And it wasn't until maybe I was in my mid-20s I got exposed to sports psychology, and it helped me to deal with that anxiety. And thankfully I was able to play in national finals again and see them from a different perspective and not dread them and fear the outcome of it. Great,
Tony. Thanks for sharing that with us. We'll come back to maybe some tips and mechanisms that you might promote for players that would be struggling with that in the second section when I come back to you. Simon, really clear picture for you there now. There's a shine coming off your head.
That's yeah, I'm looking at Kate and the influencer side. I got the lighting a bit better in this room, so yeah. Talking about my early years there, Damien, you can nearly just take what Tony said and flip it. I was the opposite of everything he's just gone through. So I was strangely enough, don't tell anyone this, I was born in Monaghan, but we moved down here pretty quickly. I think I was down in Clare Galway about 5 months, and I've been pretty much here since then. So youngest of a family of four. My father's a Kerry man. My mother's a strong Carrow woman. So three sisters. Not a whole lot of sport in the family. I was kind of the baby boy. I was a bit mollycoddled all the way up. So they sent me to play rugby, I think, when I was about 8 or 9 to kind of sort me out. So Probably would have never played rugby, only the Corinthians was about 400 or 500 meters up the road. Other than that, I'd been playing, I didn't play any hurling, because in those days you picked one sport and that was it. So I played football with Clare Galway, and that was on at the same time as the rugby. So it was kind of rugby from an early age, but I've always loved football, always loved hurling. National school, same thing. Rural school, played a bit of hurling and football all the way through that. But when I got to secondary school, went into town, into the Bish. So the opposite to Tony over the road in Mary's. It was kind of a stronger rugby school. We were well behind in the GAA sports at those stages. They've come back a bit in the last couple of years and gone way down in the rugby. But a bit like Kate mentioned earlier, I'd do anything to get out of class. So Tony's drive wasn't apparent in me. I was away at trials. I was playing games every Wednesday. Anytime I could get out of school. I was even a sub on the hurling team, even though I never played. But so yeah, the whole academic side, I did a decent enough leaving cert to get into NUIG. More the creative side, so I was quite good at English, those kind of things. Went in and did arts. But when I got to college, I realised how great things were. So did very little in there for the first year. I was playing rugby at a decent level, so I'd represented Connacht at schools level, at 20s level, and I was in nothing like the academies are now, but I was in their first ever academy with Johnny O'Connor, who was my neighbour, next door neighbour growing up, so you might know him. He's gone on to play for Ireland and the Lions. I like to say between Johnny and I, we got 14 senior caps for Ireland, but they were all his. But yeah, so I concentrated very much on rugby. I got injured pretty early, about 21, 22. And never really recovered. It was a bad knee injury, but in that time I'd seen the real early days of video analysis coming into play. So back then it was, you got a game recorded and it was nearly a 4-hour video session where you went through the game and it might be 2.5 hours in before your name is mentioned. That kind of shows the kind of player I was, but it could be 2.5 hours in and then, you know, you're half asleep down the back. So I had a big interest in it from there. Didn't continue in NUG, went back and did commerce for a couple of years and then fell over to the other side, GMIT, and I did film and television. So I think I was the only one with an interest in sport in that course in GMIT. Camp Krusty, I used to call it. So whenever I asked, did anyone see the match yesterday, no one had ever seen the match. So what happened there was kind of old coaches that I used to have knew I was in there, had access to cameras, and then from there I started videoing games, cutting up games and giving feedback to coaches. From there, a coach I had way back had heard I was doing all this and he'd set up a company. I went to work with him in Avenir Sports in Galway, Tommy Keneally. So then from there I got to see a whole world of analysis. I got to work at club level, inter-county level, right up to international soccer team. We used to be in the box with them for each game with Trapattoni, O'Keefe, Roy Keane, Martin O'Neill. And it was at a time I would support all the rugby teams around the country. So I'd spend 2 or 3 days every season in with each team. And obviously Connacht being my local team, I haven't been in there and tried to play for them a little bit. I got a bit of a relationship going with Pat Lamb. The year after they won it, he offered me a job then to come on board. So it's all been downhill for Connacht since then. They're one title, but yeah, that's me kind of in a nutshell up to the college years, flying through it.
And doing the film, Simon, it never really got off the ground from the course. It was straight into, you were creating enough of a name for yourself on the sports field that's just what you wanted to do.
Yeah, I couldn't be more different than the people in there. I love them all for their quirks and whatever else, but I don't know if any of them ever got to the film field either. But it was there was a lot of pain for the art, pains for pain's sake. But I kind of went straight into sport from there. Just I suppose I'm lucky in that I've landed on my feet a number of times. Certain coach had come, and it's someone I would have gotten on with well in the past. And I'm not in there to offer an opinion. I was in there to do a job. And then, as I'll probably come to later, a big element of my role is gaining the trust of coaches and players. And I was lucky enough just to fall in with good guys and get success a couple of times. And then it's led to where I am now.
Yeah, you're playing yourself down a little bit. Like, nobody would keep asking you to come back if you weren't doing a good job. So I think it's a bit hard on yourself to say you kept landing on your feet.
Yeah, the Irish, we don't want to give ourselves too much praise, but I do honestly think I landed on my feet an awful lot. And you know, maybe when you land on your feet enough times, you get enough chances, you can prove yourself once or twice and pull something off.
And self-taught on all of this experience and just finding your way. And then obviously when you got into Avenir, you had mentors there.
Yeah, you would have been self-taught in that it was as simple as I would have been using old edit suites in the college to cut up hurling games, football games, rugby games. And then when I got into Avenir, they would use a software that I still use to this day called Sports Code. But yeah, mentors, I'd you know, much like Tony said there, my dad would have been a big influence, not in the sporting side. He would have watched every game I probably ever played in, but big influence just on every decision you make. Quite quiet man, but you know, leads by example. Then the first boss I ever had still lives up the road from me. Big influence on me still. You know, I would have called to him all during this COVID thing just for chats and stuff. But I would have a coach then. He coached us at under 18s. Joe Gorham, Tony'd know from the Galway days, but we've nearly followed each other everywhere we went. Galway football, Connacht rugby, that kind of thing. So yeah, he's still a great guy to have a chat with. Hugely positive. And a really good influence on me up to this point.
I'll let you get back to that Americano. Kate.
I'm breaking all Kate's recommendations. It's caffeine after 8 and I have a can of Coke ready to go next.
I'm trying not to judge, Simon.
Kate, just a little bit now. So jumping into, you set up NutriKate, but prior to that, were you involved in teams, or how were you establishing yourself in your own field?
Yeah, so when I finished up my Sport and Exercise Nutrition Masters in Loughborough, I was extremely naive in the sense that I thought I'd return back to Dublin. I'd just walk into a job like the way everyone seemed to do after college. Like, it was completely deluded, to be honest. But as it transpires, I did, when my Masters was coming to an end, there was an opportunity in a clinic in the UK to get an internship. And I was like, absolutely. Like, I didn't really know, you know, the industry, it's definitely growing and nutrition's getting more acknowledged, which is great. And it's come on leaps and bounds over the last number of years. But at the same time, it can be, you know, it kind of felt like you don't really have a great support network. And for example, like there's 2 people that did the Masters with me out of a class 25 that are actually working in sports performance. So everyone else went kind of down a different route or in the corporate sector, whatever it might be, and aren't doing anything really related to our Masters. So yeah, I kind of wanted some direction. So I thought obviously getting practical experience, I was doing a few bits over the course of my Masters with different basketball teams and athletes that maybe I would have met just even through chatting to, you know, through the gym or whatever it might have been. Like, I was playing different sports in Loughborough too, just to keep myself ticking over and to meet people because I didn't know anyone when I got over there. So I ended up getting the internship in this clinic, and they worked with elite athletes. So from professional cricket players to footballers. So I started to get to work alongside my colleagues in the clinic and work alongside those athletes, as well as then getting the experience with general population. So I was very fortunate in that way that, you know, it kind of gave me a chance to work with, you know, the sporting side of things and also then general population. And then when I came back to Ireland then and to Dublin, you know, I'd know Daniel Davey, who's a very well-established sports nutritionist here in Ireland. And, you know, I would have kept in contact with him over a number of years. And he actually put me forward for the Longford gig. So I ended up working with the lads, and I'm into my 3rd season with them. And, you know, for me, it made so much sense to be working in a sporting environment because I played, you know, I still play basketball. I've grown up, I played, you know, for Ireland, for Dublin. I've got to travel with it. It's been such a huge part of my life, and I owe so many positives in my life to it, and even skills that I learned from sports that I've transferred into business and through my life. Like Tony mentioned there in terms of time management and things like that, like I would have acquired them when I got a little bit more mature and realized what I wanted to actually do with my life. I started to see how these can all interlink. So I started working with the lads, and then I started working with the Dublin senior ladies team as well, and I'm into my third year with them too. So yeah, it's kind of just all taken off from there in terms of working with different club teams and different organisations around the country since I've been back in Ireland. So yeah, it started off in the UK with probably a different cohort of athletes, from basketball to cricket or whatever it might have been, and then now here it's very heavily GAA for the most part. Yeah, I have a few individual athletes that come my way who want, a helping hand, or maybe don't get the support from the program that they're in from a nutrition perspective and want to take their performance up and the extra few percent. And they can come from all over, from athletics to rowing to whatever it might be. So it's nice and varied. So I'm very fortunate that way. Keeps me.
Yes. The team environment is very much something you're comfortable in. But getting down to brass tacks, how do you add value within that environment?
Yeah, so I suppose it depends on what my, how long I get with teams, in terms of how far you delve into the nitty-gritties of it all. So one thing that I look to do from the get-go, so whether it's one session or, I'm with them, working closely with them for a season, I think I have to use, I suppose, language that's going to resonate with the group in front of me. And you're looking to get hooks, that will stick in a player's mind. So I always try and make all the information that they're getting, has stemmed from the research that's out there, and I suppose then putting the tangible element to that, so making it actually practical. So there's plenty of research out there, but it's like, well, what's actually useful for what I'm doing and for the people in front of me? So it's about taking that knowledge and translating in a way that the players understand and the management understand. So from really day one, no matter what I do, it's about I suppose building a rapport, and sometimes the capacity that depends on how long you've got with the team. So that can be as something as small as just speaking to them as equals, and speaking the appropriate language that's going to get through to them, and building it on from there. So I just think I try and add as much practicality to every session that I do, so that irrespective of if it's one session or I'm working with you over a season, you're getting something from it.
Right, bribing them with the healthy brownies and the banana muffins, and that I'm sure helps.
It's all coming out now.
And just on, say, like John Conlon came out there a couple of years ago when they were in the All-Ireland semi-final, Clare hurler, and very much had changed his diet to a liquid diet, was sort of blending everything, and he was challenging for Player of the Year. And then obviously we have a high percentage now of people that are gluten intolerant, and I'm sure you get a lot of your athletes to keep diaries and then track to see what they respond well to and not.
Yeah, so I think that's definitely the beauty when you get to work with a team, more closely. So I think it's so important, no matter what advice I'm giving, if I can tailor that to the individual, because definitely in GAA, you're dealing with someone who is training like a professional athlete, is an elite level athlete, but they also have a full-time job or they're a full-time student. So understanding that the pressures that they might be facing, and again, understanding their preferences and needs, and depending on where they're at in terms of what they're looking to get from a performance perspective, what they're looking to get from their body composition perspective. The more I can get to know them, the better I can advise them. I think the key thing that I look to get through with all of my athletes is recognizing their individuality. So comparing like for like doesn't always work. There's key principles that we want to get through to players. So, whether it's increasing carbohydrate intake with training demands, something as simple as that, but that will look different for different people, because you might work on a building site and it may be way more labor intensive than your man who's sitting in the office all day, or you might be running around with kids, all day, or you might be, a lot taller, smaller. So I think, while a liquid diet, is never something you prescribe to someone. Yes, you can add in liquids for extra calorie, to get in more calories. But if that worked for him and he got everything he needed out of it, that's great. But that could be like the worst thing for the next man, that I'm talking to. So it's understanding those differences and making sure that players understand, what suits them, what isn't suiting them, and knowing that there's alternatives to that.
Yeah, I think John's reasoning was that if food wasn't sitting well with him pre-game and he just wasn't able to perform and was very sluggish, and that's something to work. But as you say, that might only be a 1%er, but it's very important to know your players and find out what works and what makes them tick.
Yeah, exactly. So again, while that worked well for him, and he understood that, okay, this is my needs. Can I get everything I need from this way of having food? And he could. Whereas, food, there's a lot more to it than just the nutrition element too. Like, people like taste and like, the way it looks, and it brings people together. So, you have to take that element into account as well as performance, because you're dealing with a person before the athlete that they are. So you need to make sure that, all aspects of their life, like from their mental like health and space, to making sure everything's all right in their day job or college or whatever it might be. So, health's multifaceted, and then obviously performances too. So it's recognizing those different elements.
And then obviously recovery plays a huge role in your work as well. And with all the GAA teams training at 8 o'clock at night and finishing at 10, and then trying to tuck into a high carb protein meal, and then trying to get some sleep, maybe to drive an hour and a half, they have to be some really difficult challenges.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, that's a perfect example where a drink replacement might actually be really useful. Yeah, like there definitely is challenges. So I suppose, looking like sleep is a huge part of recovery. So we want our players to get the most out of that and the highest quality of sleep, because it's great to say, oh, I sleep for 8 or 9 hours a night. But if it's poor quality, that's another story then altogether. So, after training, some players, from the physicality of it, they mightn't actually be able to stomach anything, and you're looking to get some sort of smoothie with their protein and carbohydrates into them. Or other players love to sit down and have a meal and it doesn't have any negative repercussions, then they can still get sleep. They still sleep really well. So again, it goes back to, well, being in a position where your players feel like they can talk to you openly about where they're at, and you can get a good understanding and advise them and guide them in the right direction, so that they get the most out of what they're doing, and that their recovery protocols are as best as they can make them in their circumstances.
And Kate, what are the real challenging areas to try and make ground with as regards a county player and then George in public?
Yeah, again, like it's so varied, and some things that might be like really difficult with one athlete are like not even a problem with someone else. I think from the get-go, like most things, like buy-in is just so important, and I think if you can get that, everything else falls into place. Like particularly with trust, like if you come in an athletic environment, and even if it's the general population, like if you're looking to change something that someone's very accustomed to, and nutrition in particular is like a belief system, like people have very strong views, very strong beliefs, because it's such a big part of our life. So again, I think it's really important that you can build some sort of trust and rapport, that they can openly speak to you about where they're coming from and why they might think that way. And it leads. Sorry?
The education element.
Yeah, education. And I think trust, though, then is important, because it bridges the gaps between, okay, well, they might have the knowledge, but there's one thing about having the knowledge, but then it needs to get implemented. So I think rapport and understanding where the athlete's coming from, so you can bridge that gap and maybe, understand the hurdles that are there, so that you can help knock them down with the athlete. But I think buy-in's a big one. I think that's definitely in sport in general, I've seen it from even a coaching perspective. If the coach doesn't have buy-in from the players, like the season is a long one, and it's not always very enjoyable. And that's from my own experience more so than even from a professional perspective.
2 final questions, Kate, for now. Supplementation, yes or no?
It's not always a necessity or a need, but it definitely can have a role. So again, it'll depend on the athlete. I always look to get a food first approach. A lot of what we need we can get from our diet, and then there's 1 or 2 things from performance perspective that can be very useful. So I'd always look to nail the foundation of their diet before even looking at supplements. Like, supplements won't just fix anything unless it's something that we can't get from the diet and we've tidied up everything else.
And then, Kate, obviously every couple of months we hear a story of some athlete failing a drugs test. What steps and measures do you need to put in place to ensure that doesn't happen to any of your athletes?
Yeah, so like in the GAA setup, all the athletes and myself and all the management, we have to do like an anti-doping course, which I'm sure most people here will be very familiar with. And then again, I suppose the education piece is important here. So it's relaying the importance to athletes that, that they understand, okay, well, yes, this supplement might be useful for you, but also we need to look at it, to make sure that it's in line with regulations and guidelines. So education is extremely important there. But there are like the governing bodies that are, hammering those points home too, which obviously helps reiterate the important message.
Yeah, and that just players don't go off on solo runs, sourcing their own.
Yeah, exactly. So like when I'm speaking with the athletes I work with, you go through their food diary or you go through a dietary recall and supplements that they're using. I always look at, sometimes they're like, oh, I don't even know what supplement it is. So I'll always get them to send me on a picture or whatever it might be. So then I can, check and show them then how to go about doing something like that. So they feel empowered. And that's a big thing with what I do. Like, I want my athletes to get to a point where they check in with me maybe for a bit of peace of mind, but ultimately they're empowered when they're on the road or when they're running between things, that they know how to deal with adversities, that they understand what their body requires and what it needs to match their training needs and even demands from everyday life. So that's what I'd be looking to do with them on that front.
Excellent, thanks, Kate. Tony O, jumping back to you, and we talked a little bit about your career and you were breaking in. So you played in the noughties, the early noughties into the early teens. So you had a long career with the Galway Hurlers.
Yeah, I made my debut with the seniors, Damien, in 2003 and finished up in 2013. Probably just came in at the start of it when sports science really wasn't at the forefront what I would have seen. Anyway, Jerry Dempsey would have been our coach that time, and he was doing the circuit training, he was giving probably meal advice, and he was also doing the hurling coaching. So, he had a massive amount of stuff at his door now. And when you look at it 10 years later, you have someone who's doing there's 3 people doing those jobs at the moment. And sometimes, there could be 3 or 4 coaches. So, the sports science side of it was well behind that time. And, meals after training could have been anything. Young players coming into the squad would regularly be still eating Supermax on the way home from training after pre-season, and by the 4th or 5th session they were getting sick and realizing that this wasn't going to get them any benefits or marginal gains. So they started to jump on the bus with us then maybe and eat a bit more healthier and realized that it wasn't their minor under 16 campaign they were training for. This was the real thing, and the intensity of training was going to go up. They're going to have to start minding themselves a lot better. So I think my first experience of the sports science side of it was probably we would have got a Munster rugby coach in doing S&C training with us around 08, 09. Nutrition talks would have been part of it for a couple of years, but we'd no one consistent around that. Video analysis would have been very sporadic as well. Some management teams didn't use it at all. It could be pulled out for the first time in the season, maybe 2 or 3 weeks before a championship match, and anything could be thrown up for a couple of hours, as Simon would say, and it might come back out again. So the consistency approach around sports science compared to now was light years behind, and even I think the guys coming in from professional environments doing S&C didn't really know what was best for GAA bodies and the type of training. So we would have really bulked up for a season or two as a hurling team and put on huge muscle mass, but found then that when it came to the summer that you probably weren't getting to the pitch, which you weren't mobile enough and flexible enough. So as you see probably with the Dublin footballers and a lot of the teams now, the GAA body and athletic body is really trimmed down. So everything has moved on so much, and the players really well catered for now around the sports science team.
And Tony O, within your own field, and I'm sure you're fielding phone calls from club managers up and down the country, and they're looking for you to add the couple percentage to their team, and potentially it happens when a team is in a semi-final or a final or quarter-final. Usually, how does that phone call go? What is the manager looking for, and what is your response?
They're probably looking for, we've the last couple of seasons, we've probably failed to close out games. Some lads are nervous, some lads are lacking belief. And how do we actually build that in the group and, get a collective buy-in? They might have 2/3 of their squad training really well and preparing really well, but the bottom third aren't fully on board, and it's stopping them even realising their potential. So, it can be any kind of them facets, Damien, and you're trying to get in and work, and as Kate said, get the kind of trust and the buy-in of the group first before you go landing them on what great teams do and what the expectations of great teams are and how they prepare and how they practice and how they set goals and perform on the weekend. So for a club team starting out, you're probably looking at the culture and setting that, and what's our team values, what are we looking to achieve this year, what are we not doing, what's the perception of the team at the moment in the community and in the county, and how are we going to change these perceptions? And what do we believe about ourselves and what do we not believe about ourselves? Because, if everyone in the room isn't believing that we're going to win the county championship this year, well then, there's going to be a drop off in effort and training levels if you haven't that belief in yourself and the belief in the system. So creating that environment around the players where there's no excuses, everything is provided for them from a coaching aspect, from a resources aspect as much as possible. And then, getting the players to take ownership of it then and drive the standards within the leadership group and the senior leaders in the team, and putting a lot at their door and asking questions and drawing it out of them what they want and, what they dislike around the team at the moment, and, getting them to challenge each other in a safe way and a right way around behaviours that aren't going to aid the team and enhance the improvement around performance.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. And a lot of that stuff is, the pre-season or the early season, and you're building towards an end goal. But do you get the people that's expecting you to do a miracle in a 60-minute session?
Yeah, you will get pulled in maybe 2 weekends before the quarter-final or semi-final, and it's definitely a lot more challenging to get the trust of the group, number one, and then get the buy-in. And, but that's a challenge I like. And, if you can get over that quarter-final, you'll have another couple of weeks working with the group, and the next thing you might have 6 or 7 sessions done and you're into a Connacht final or an All-Ireland semi-final or final, and by the end of the year you've really moved the team together and they've bought into it and they're used to it. And I have my experience at different things, whether it be nutrition talks or video analysis or sports psychologists coming in for one session, and because the players don't see it there consistently, they don't feel that management are buying into it, or it's not an important enough resource that we don't see it consistently. So, to get the value of these things, the more consistent that type of resource can be in a team, I think the more performance improvement you will see in the individuals and the collective over the course of, 1, 2, 3 and 4 seasons. And, I don't believe I come in with a magic bullet that I'm going to solve everything in 45 minutes to an hour, but I would feel with my experience and what I've learned through theory and practice that I could add maybe 1 or 2% that will help the team individually and collectively the following Sunday or the Sunday week. And, maybe how to gain their trust in that session and gain the manager's trust and see where it develops from there as well.
And what are the couple of things, Tony, there that you're going after? So, you have one of these sessions 2 weeks before a big game. It's a knockout game. What are the things that you're really targeting to try and make that 1 or 2% you talk about?
Are we avoiding failure, or are we approaching the game, taking it on as a challenge? So for me, one is a fear-based belief where, I'm avoiding risk. To go back to my 16-year-old example of an All-Ireland final, I was avoiding making mistakes. I was avoiding meeting people that week. I was avoiding people not wanting to talk about the match. I was avoiding playing in front in Croke Park because I didn't want to make a mistake. So, are you working off a place of fear? What's the communication and language of the senior leaders, the managers that week, that's either coming from a place that we're really approaching this game, we're going to challenge and enjoy this opportunity and test, or we can't lose this game. We've lost enough of quarterfinals the last 3 or 4 years. Whatever we do, don't concede a goal in the first 10 minutes. And all of a sudden, players are going out playing with a fear and no freedom or expression in their play. So every bit of the environment around our language and our emotion that we're carrying into the week, we have to look at that and say, next Sunday, what does that mean to you at the moment? How are you feeling about it? How can we reframe some of the conversations into that approach effect rather than avoiding it? And what are we looking forward to the weekend? And what are we looking forward to the challenge and the opportunity? And getting that as a common language around the group, that this isn't something that failure is fatal and it's the end of the road. It's failure is a part of sport and losing is a part of sport. We shouldn't be fearing it. Winning it's all outcome based language. So we talk about performance and we talk around practice and we talk around preparation and things we can control in the week. And if the outcome at 5 o'clock on Sunday is good enough, well, we know we've prepared right and we practiced right and we performed well. And if it isn't, we'll review it and see it again and have that consistency approach. And for players and management not to be getting too high over winning or losing is the key thing. It's trying to treat them two imposters as the same thing and not being on an emotional roller coaster that, if we win, we're the best team in the world. If we lose, we're the worst team in the world. There has to be a consistent balance there and having that balance for 3 or 4 seasons, that we're not going to master everything on Sunday's performance and we're not going to lose everything on Sunday's performance. That, to get really good at your sport, you're going to have to put 6, 7, 8 or 10 years at it to get to where you want to, and it's a long-term game, and losing one game isn't going to define a season or define a career.
And Simon mentioned a little bit earlier about the Irish mentality and to play yourself down. But from your experiences with GAA teams in particular, and them wanting to be the underdog, and what you're talking about there is actually having the belief that you're going to achieve good things, and that the flip in that mindset.
Yeah, we probably all have this understated thing about talking up what we're good at and what we've done and achieved, and that's fine for a while. But in a performance context, if you're not really talking up your strengths within the group and among your peers, and if you're not talking about what we're good at, you're not really reinforcing that bank of confidence that you can get from good performance and good practice and good preparation. So we all have a negativity bias in our brain that we work off a lot of the time, and it's to try and flip that and say, what was good about tonight's session? What was good about our last performance? What strengths does the X player bring to this team that's adding to our overall performance? And it's to try and work off that. Yes, to be always performance improvements in training and in practice and in matches, but it's to try and really look at 70 or 80% of what a player is adding to this team and what the team is performing well at. And that, players are happy then, and they're around an environment that's recognising and reinforcing what we're good at. And every team is unique and special in their own different ways, and everyone plays sport in a different brand and a different style and come from different cultures. So tap into that and realise that we all have different identities, both individually and teams, and to really reinforce what makes us special and different. And that's what I love really about connecting into a group and realising that we all have different language and perspectives, and how can we bring it all together and put it into a pot and be one collective unit and one collective tribe that is going on a bus together to achieve something special. And that for me is the magic of sport and the unknown that could happen out of one performance.
Lovely, thanks Tony Og. Simon, again, down to brass tacks, what do you do in layman's terms? What do you do?
Well, I suppose in my current environment, we pretty much analyze everything. So I know you've got this whole paralysis by analysis thing. Our job is to take the massive amount of information and refine it down to what's needed by the players, what's needed by the coaches. So a week for me, we're looking at opposition from 2 weeks out. So I'll start looking at, if we're playing Munster in 2 weeks' time, I'll have looked at the last 4 or 5 games. the day before, if we play Munster next week and we're playing Ulster tomorrow, the day before we play Ulster, we sit down as a coaching team. I'll bring to the table what I've noticed about them. I'll have done databases on those teams for each coach in their particular area. So what we have is we have an attack coach, a defence coach, and we have our head coach, Andy Friend. So and Nigel Carlin as well. So sorry, Jimmy Duffy, our forwards coach. So they each get different databases. We come together and we come up with the plan. Now we're refining that system all the time. We're going to change it again. COVID has given us a huge amount of time to refine that system. So we'll come together on that Friday, put together our training plan for the next week. But still, all the time remembering we have a game tomorrow. So then we go into that game to run through a normal week. Then so in game, I'm looking to identify say we're playing Ulster, are Ulster doing what we thought they'd do? Are they doing something different? And if so, what is it? We do all of our work pretty much before the game. So the whole idea that in-game analysis can have a massive swing on what's happening out there, it's a bit romantic to think that we can change what's going to happen right during the game. You can go in and you can show footage to the players that might make a difference in the second half. But a huge amount of your work is done before that game, and you're from that point on, you're identifying, right, they're doing exactly as we thought, or no, they're doing something different. Let's get some information to our team leaders that might change it and give us that 1-2% swing. So once that game is over, we go and we do a game analysis. So we'll have up to 3 guys working on it. We'll do a game analysis, which is just your scrums, restarts, lineouts. In the GAA field, when we used to do it, it's the same thing. You've got your kickouts, line balls, scores for, scores against, and then the huge amount of work goes into the individual analysis. So we're looking at every single action that every single player carries out on the pitch, be it in attack and defence, on the ball, off the ball. And what we're doing is we're trying to come up with maybe 3 clips for that player to define that whole performance. So one area he needs to work on, and we've gone very strongly, a big issue I have with performance analysis is used quite a lot as a stick. We're focusing very much on what the player's done well in that game, and maybe 1 or 2 things he needs to refine and come back together. So on a Sunday then, coaching staff will have a meeting again. Going forward, it's all going to be online. This is one beauty of the whole COVID thing. We've all learned how to do our Zooms and do everything a bit better. So we won't have to go to the office on a Sunday anymore. We'll sit around at home. That'll be 1 or 2 hour meeting, and we've got our review of that game ready to go on the Monday morning. We'll have a team review on the Monday morning, and we'll put that game to bed. So we're very much focused now by putting that game to bed by 11 o'clock on the Monday morning and starting to focus on what's coming down the track the next week. So we'll have a walkthrough on the afternoon, so the players are a bit beaten up from a Saturday or a Sunday, whatever day we play. They've got a full day of recovery, and all we'll do is we'll walk through some stuff on the AstroTurf. Then we train a heavy training session on a Tuesday. We'll have 4 cameras on that. Again, we'll analyse that session as it's going on, and we now are going to start giving feedback. So, instead of just giving that feedback after the session, there's going to be relevant stuff in game. And from this season moving forward, we're going to actually have facility to show them footage on the pitch. It'll be a quick look at a screen, bang, and they're back out on the pitch if it's required. They'll go home. All that footage is available then to them on their phones. They'll go home, review it. They'll have to come up with maybe 1 or 2 clips. If they want to reference it to a coach, they'll send that to the coach and they'll get some feedback on that. We go again on Thursday. Same thing. It's a heavy training session on a Thursday. We'll video that 4 angles and we'll feed it back to the players. There'll be a review of that on the Friday just before they go out and do captain's run. So there's kind of 2 heavy training sessions in the week that we'd analyse. So all in all, what we analyse is we're looking at opposition from a few weeks out. We're looking in game at a number of key performance indicators as to whether we can win or lose that game. And again, just having 1 or 2, marginal gains in game. Then we do a post review. And then what we're doing is we're looking at all the other games that are played that weekend. So we're trying to identify trends, what is making a team win. So it sounds very easy, but if you're looking at certain people and what they do very well, we might be trying to emulate or trying to stop a certain team doing certain things. So it might be someone as lowly as 14th in the table like Zebre, they could be the best team at running the ball out of their own 22. So when we come to play them, we as an analysis team need to be teeing those up from a few weeks out. In terms of what we do, that's kind of the facility for the coaches. In previous life in GAA, talking about what Tony and Kate were talking about, when you're brought in just to do a job as such, you're trying to identify things that can add that 1 or 2%. It always would have been the same that we're in a county semi-final now. And I'm glad that Tony said it, that do players place the same value on it if it's something that's only brought in at a county semi-final, or do they, put huge emphasis on it and get nervous? That's all to do with the mentality of the player. But we'd be brought in, asked to find that 1-2% maybe when you analyse an opposition. But at that stage, you're always focusing on an opposition. You're not focusing on the actual team itself. Whereas in a professional environment, we're nearly 90% focusing on ourselves and what we can do to improve. So that's the beauty of working with a professional team and working with one team. So I used to be working with lots of individual teams at inter-county level, and then for times working with particular ones over a prolonged period. It's the same thing that's coming across from Kate and Tony. It's hard to get the trust in that 1 or 2 weeks, but when I'm in the environment I'm in now, trying to develop trust between coaches, players, staff, it's the biggest thing that anyone in a high performance environment is trying to add, is that level of trust. So what we do with the players, it varies, and it's when you get to know that player that there's no point trying to load certain players with a huge amount of information, because it just doesn't work. But there is certain guys who'll come to you on Monday and Tuesday. They've watched every single lineup, they've watched every single scrum, they've watched every single restart, and they're just coming to you to ask your opinion on certain things. They're coming to you to ask what a certain player is going to do on that opposition. Whereas you'll have other guys who the night before a game you'll get a knock on the hotel room door and it's, geez, what does your man do actually when he's coming in? So it's just all the different guys that you have to get to know. Someone like Jack Harty, he'll want to know on the pitch in the warm-up, right, the wind's blowing a certain direction in the sports ground. What have we done well on certain days when the wind is blowing in that direction? He doesn't want to know that early in the week because, as you all know, the weather in the sports ground, it changes between 10 to 4 and 10 past 4. So there's, and as I said, there is those certain guys that are just so relaxed. Performance analysis doesn't have a huge impact on them. They get that information they need the night before the game. They'll still go out and be the best player on the pitch. Probably know it's Bundy I'm talking about when you're going there, but there is that's a long-winded answer, Damien, as to what we analyse. We're kind of looking at everything that moves and then tailoring it down to what's relevant for that player, what's relevant for that coach, and building up that level of trust between you and the athlete to know he needs this much, he needs that much, and some other guys just want to go out and play. They don't care what an opposition guy does, and it's like Tony said, you have to get everything in the melting pot, melt it all down, and certain things work for certain guys, but it's developing that element of trust and letting them giving them what they need as opposed to prescribing what you think they need.
And then, Simon, paring all that back right down to a GAA club team, and you have one guy on the side of the field with a clipboard and a bit of paper ruled out. Potentially you have another team working off a camera that might be on top of the dugout, mightn't even be an end zone jobby. And then you have some teams that are sending the video of their game off to Avenir Sports or somebody like them for them to clip it and send it back to them. So what, I suppose, advice would you give to a club to get some value for putting the time into performance analysis?
Yeah, like if it was a blank sheet, I'd always recommend that teams, depending on timescales again, but if they had a little bit of time and they were putting a season-long plan in place, I'd get them to focus a lot more on themselves. The gains are to be made on yourself as opposed to what an opposition is going to do. As they all know, an opposition can change on the day. They can spring something brand new on you, whereas if you're working on certain measures that can help you win. So like there's very, very simple things. You're talking about the guy with the clipboard. What we measure in game is really simple, but we've, over the course of all my experience and the course of working with the current management team, there's certain things that if we win those areas, we'll win games. So I know in lots of, in GAA sports, you might look at work rate and equate that to the number of tackles you make. We in Connacht Rugby is no secret. If we win more 50-50s than the opposition, it's nearly 100% indicator that we're going to win the game. So it's not an exact performance indicator. It's more a measure of the want of a player to go out and win the game. It might be crossing more into Tony's field where you're dealing with the mind. But if we lose 50-50s on a shitty wet night over in Bridgend where we played the Ospreys, where, you know, it came to light afterwards that guys maybe were not fully tuned in as to what they were facing. It was a tiny dressing room. It was a terrible pitch. All these things. We lost the 50-50. We won every other area on the pitch, but we lost the 50-50. The number of times the ball hit the ground, they came out on top. It's really a measure of want. So it's coming up with something that's relevant to your team, something that's relevant to your attack philosophy or your defense philosophy. So when you talk about what we measure, the things we celebrate in a team meeting on a Monday is probably something that we're not able to get a measure on through any type of software. So I always show an example. We played the Cheetahs in Bloemfontein our first time in South Africa, and we were about to lose the game. There was a line breakthrough, and Niziadi Loken comes from absolutely nowhere to chop a guy as he's going over the line. The defense mentality we've been working on the last 2 years that allowed him to do that is there's always a solution until someone stops working. So again, it's not a measure of what a camera is going to pick up. It's a mentality thing, but they're the things that our cameras pick up that we celebrate on the Monday. So going back to your original question, what are the easy wins for teams? It's identifying what you think is going to win you a game. So if a camera can help you measure those off the ball runs, it's setting up a camera in a certain way that you're not focused right in tight on what the player is doing with the ball. You're talking about trying to capture as much of the pitch as you can. Your coach having an idea that if you cross the 45 X number of times, you should be scoring X number of points. Different teams will have different little ratios that they'll identify through the course of a season or a number of seasons that are going to win them games. So it's a long-winded of saying the coach probably needs to know what he wants to get out of it. There isn't a magic bullet that an analyst is going to come in and they go, right, put a camera on that and tell us what you see. Because it's very easy for us to come in and see, right, so-and-so isn't moving, and then the coach will go, right, well, that's our game plan because we're trying to draw them out a little bit or we're trying to send them in a little bit. You really need to get the trust of the coach, get an idea of what they want to get out of a performance analysis session, and then the longer you work with them, probably the more gains they can get and the easier stuff you can identify them. But it comes back down to the coach and them having an idea of what game plan they want to implement and how they want to play the game. Then you can come up with measures that are pretty easy.
Thanks, Simon. Yeah, so Michael, there was a sort of an answer to your question there. You're more prescriptive about asking for the time, focusing on opposition, but Simon's recommendation really is working on your own performance and getting that really good. And if you can win your battles, then what the opposition do is almost irrelevant. So we'll just jump into a general discussion. Kate, I'm going to come back to you and a little bit about what athletes respond well to. You're on mute, Kate.
Sorry, forgetting. Excuse me. So I think kind of like the lads alluded to there, like it does depend on who's in front of you. I think there is no substitute though in terms of like what they see me doing. So for example, and I don't mean that's, practice as you preach. I mean, if they see me looking to putting in the work, looking to give them different options. Like I think, athletes respond well to seeing, I suppose, that hard work coming from whether it's, any part of the management. I suppose, when you're working towards something that means so much to you, you want to know that everyone is in your corner and everyone is working as hard as they possibly can to get the outcome. And when I say work hard, like working effectively, like hitting measures and, using our time efficiently, particularly because, in GAA, as I mentioned before, like, yeah, they're working like professional athletes, but they also have a full-time job or whatever it might be, other responsibilities, and they're trying to juggle the two. So I suppose we have to work very efficiently. So I think when an athlete knows, well, when you've got the trust with them, when you've built that rapport, and they can see you putting in the work that's required, I think they will respond to that. But in terms of taking that a step further and getting the most out of that athlete. I think understanding them and what their needs are and what they really need from you is really how they progress and optimize, their performance and everything that goes with that.
Tony Og, about building a player's confidence. Is it important, and what's a good way about going about that?
I think it's the ultimate for every player to go out there confident in themselves and confident in their abilities, that they're able to match up to what they're going marking. And for me, it has to start with the player himself. If he's looking outside himself for confidence, that if someone gives me a good comment that I'm going to be 100% confident on Sunday, well, then he could be a while waiting during the week. So it starts with our inner voice. What's the conversations I'm having with myself around the opponent, or around the venue, or around my own ability, and what am I listening to around that, and what do I believe about myself on that? What can coaches do around confidence? We can use the likes of Simon there, where we constantly bombard players with their best clips, the team's best clips. This is what we've done well throughout the week and throughout the year. We can have peer-to-peer feedback on what we see in teammates and what they're good at, and we reinforce it in training. Coaches can absolutely grow it in players by recognising and reinforcing good habits in training, good habits off the field, good habits in their last performance, and also having good role models within the team that would speak openly around what helps them get into the right state for matches. So an emotional state is a major part of it. So if I'm a coach who's coming in and I'm on edge and I'm nervous and I'm anxious, that the players feed off that emotion. So what's your emotion state going into the dressing room on the morning of the game? Are you too high? Are you too low? Where is it at for you? And as a player, how do I get into the right emotional state that I'm in a good state to play matches and I'm at the right level and the right pitch? So they're all things that are in control of the environment and in control that players can work on and work on past clips that they've done this to reinforce that performance accomplishment, and also using their imagination through things like mental rehearsal and visualization. So they can put themselves into Pierce Park or Crow Park 15 or 20 times a day and rehearse mental situations of tackling, winning high balls, scoring, defending, responding to a mistake, and mentally rehearsing that in their mind. Our subconscious doesn't realize the difference between real and imagined experiences. So I can build that pattern and that pattern of recognition into my mind before Sunday comes as well.
Look at Tony, the professional there, addressing Paddy's question that he's seen coming up. Thanks very much for that, Tony. And you talk about the visualising, and it's definitely something I used during my career, about imagining making saves, and then because you have to see it in your own head before you can do it. And it's the little child, the 9 or 10 month old child that's crawling around for 2 or 3 months, that sees other people walking, that then lends themselves to say, what's this all about, and inspires them to go walking. Is there an element, Tony Og, of fake it until you make it?
I definitely think you have to, put yourself into a situation where you see yourself winning an Ireland. You have to see yourself dominating a position on the field. You have to talk to yourself like you're a champion. You have to talk to yourself like you're a winner. You have to feel that you're up there at that level and can achieve that standard. And, we've got to have high expectations of ourselves. If I'm a golfer and I'm standing over, a push that's 6 feet away and I can't see myself scoring that, well, the majority of the time that's the expectation will happen. If I see myself putting the ball in the water, that's what will happen. So we've got to set high expectations and expect ourselves to play well and want to play great and want to play well and have that expectation. Because if you don't, you're going to get an average display. So, setting yourself high expectations is important. And, if you don't hit excellence in our performance, great isn't a bad performance and good isn't too bad either. So, as coaches and managers and players, we should be looking for the best from ourselves every game and every session.
Thanks, Tony Og. We'll come back to Dermot's question there in a couple of minutes, Tony. Simon, just as regards to, do you have any involvement with the underage players in Connacht Rugby? So the academy squads, your 15, 16-year-olds.
Well, there would be an analyst. There's a head academy analyst in there, but kind of as an umbrella, we're trying to introduce the same practices from the pro team down. what you're looking at more at that side, though, is using performance analysis as a development role. So they would play a lot less games and would train a lot more. So the ratio is quite different there. They'd play with their clubs on weekends. They'd come back in and review the performance. So the academy analyst will break down the performance in a team club environment, but their main focus when they're in the walls of the sports ground is skill development. So they spend a huge amount of time being videoed and then breaking down the skills that they're trying to perform and improving them in the next session. So they'd have the likes of Mossy Lawler, the former Munster player, would be huge on skill acquisition and skill development, and that's where the majority of their time is spent. So it's learning the game, gaining game sense in terms of they'll be given little areas to look at. So they might be told to go and look at the All Blacks counter-attack, and that's in order to develop themselves if they're a 15. But the majority of what happens in the academy is skill development, is trying to develop themselves as a player and identifying what's needed to be a professional as they move through. So it's not just performance analysis. You're talking into, we'd have, a nutritionist in there. We've got some of Phil and Tony's role in there, and all those are available to them. So although I don't have a huge amount of contact with them, the organization as an umbrella, everybody's trying to get a little bit of access to them to bring them through so that they develop all the right habits, that if they get in the team, they can hopefully secure themselves a pro contract and develop a career out of it. And
Simon, this might be something that somebody else puts in place for you. So if you're not sure of the answer, that's fine. But as regards to sharing information with teenagers through video clips and parental consents and that sort of stuff. So again, my thinking is for club managers to be able to provide that same thing about doing a recording, being able to show it to the player so the player can learn, whether that's just with an iPad on the side of the field, and being able to give that feedback. So like Tony Yoga saying about visualizing, so if the player can see their errors and where they're going well, then obviously they can correct it. But if they can't,
if you're talking about easy wins, there's a really easy win. So if you're talking about a footballer or a hurler who is, poor off their poorer side, being able to video what they do correctly on their strong side, being able to compare it to what they're not doing on their weaker side, there's a huge amount. So I know you may be asking about the GDPR side of things and all that I don't have huge knowledge on, other than I know you can get rounded with a waiver in terms of content. Yeah, not my area, but in terms of being able to just pull out a phone. So if you're talking about how things have changed in the past, back when I was a young player playing, you might see yourself on video very, very rarely, whereas now you can have a father or a mother out in the garden, or a parent or guardian just videoing the child kicking with the right foot, left foot, showing it to them, showing them what they're doing slightly different on their strong side as opposed to their weak side. And it's totally changed performance analysis. It's taken away all the expense of having to have a camera, having to have some kind of an analysis software. Now you can get, I think there's one called Huddle Technique, which is free, which you can video somebody doing something and break down the skill, and you've got some on-screen graphics. So there's everyone's got a performance analysis department in their pocket nearly at this stage with all the free apps, and there's definitely easy gains there in terms of developing young players at 14, 15, 16, and even younger than that.
Simon, if you don't mind, you might just type Huddle into the chat box there, and if there's any other apps that you're familiar with, again, on the free, and then obviously there's paid versions, but start off with a free version and work on from there. Kate, I just want to come back to you on how are you still learning within your role? Mute again, Kate.
I'm so intent on listening to what the lads are saying that I'm just like in my own world here. So sorry. So just in terms of how I stay up to date. So, Google Scholars, you can get like alerts on the research coming out. I try and actually learn from other practitioners around through different experiences that they might have, gone through. From a practical sense, or if there's any things that they picked up that has worked quite well. There's kind of different forums and articles that I'd look to, from big researchers in the nutrition area, and then there's actually some accounts then on the various social media platforms that actually, you know, there's good information coming out. So I between them, yeah, there's like a mixed bag there, but you know, that's kind of how I stay tipping over. Yeah, I try and pick an area too, sometimes just to hone in on if I feel like I want to, you know, brush it up on that a bit more, learn more about it, full stop. So I might take it topic by topic, you know, but it's something I look to do. I try and do a bit of reading each and every day when possible, but it's always something that's, you know, part of my weekly routine, if not daily.
And Kate, just while I'm with you, a question there from Rory about players that have been away from, teenage players that have been away from playing for a while and are going to go back training from the end of this month potentially, and then be into games very quick, about just guidelines and recommendations to get them back on a track if maybe their diet has become poor. So again, like we all know from the NFL, when they had their lockout a few years ago, a lot of injuries came off the back of a short turnover. So just about getting the body in a good place to start back training to prevent injuries.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. Like, I suppose it's kind of going to be a bit varied in terms of who was doing what in their own time over the last number of weeks, but they're definitely going to be placing a lot more of a demand on their body. So, you know, overall energy intake is really important. So recognizing that their energy demands are going up, they need to eat, you know, to match those requirements. You know, making sure that you're eating substantial meals in and around training in particular is so important. So looking to get, you know, a meal that's got some protein in there, and again, making them aware of what that is. So, you know, your fish, your chicken, your meat, whatever it might be, and then carbohydrates. So, you know, something like potato, rice, a few veggies, and whatever it might be. So looking to get something like that 2 to 4 hours. Again, it's going to depend on the athlete, and making sure that they're eating something similar after. Fluid intake is something, again, that goes under the radar, but so important for performance. So again, you know, instilling those positive habits, like remember lads or remember girls, like bring your water bottle to training, you know, you as a coach, and make sure they're taking breaks, or having a water break every now and again throughout the session. Protein's really, really important as well, going from 0 to 100 in terms of training load. So making sure that, particularly for young athletes, so that it is part of their diet, and it is, you know, part of their main meals at the very, very least, and definitely in their meals either side of training. Reiterating the importance of sleep. Like key habits that maybe, you know, they've gotten into bad habits, you know, because they don't, maybe they don't have the structure of school. So again, can we get a bit more of a pattern? Training will give some sort of structure, you know, because they might start thinking, okay, well, I need to eat, you know, this time because training's at that time, and you're developing a pattern that way. So reiterating these key take-home messages, particularly for young athletes, like, is just really, really important. And don't underestimate the power of, you know, again, Tony mentioned it earlier in terms of consistency. Like the consistency of these messages is so important, and sometimes you can't actually say it enough. So don't get bored of yourself, because particularly with younger athletes, you know, all athletes really need reminders.
Thanks, Kate. And finally, Kate, obviously you're at NutriKate on Instagram. Is there any other, you might just type it into chat box, any other people that you would recommend that our coaches and players follow? And then also you do, is it a Thursday where you take the questions and you answer people's questions? So a lot of really good information there. Yeah,
so every Tuesday, actually, I do a Thirsty Tuesday, it's called. So it's just a Q&A session for the day. And that's on NutriKate_com on Instagram. So yeah, hopefully that will work as a resource for you guys.
Great, thanks, Kate. So Tonio, we're going to hit Dermot's question there about the fear. So talking about coming from a place of fear and how you would address that within an individual or a collective bunch. You're on mute, Tonio.
Yeah, sorry, I was typing a response to Dermot. For me, Damien, it's just to assess the group at the start of the week. So you might have some informal chats with the leadership group just to assess where lads are at. Is there a sense of confidence around the next game? Is there a sense of complacency? Is there a sense of underconfidence? Assessing lads at training on the Tuesday night. What's their body language like? What's their communication? How engaged are they in the video analysis session or any kind of meeting we have prior to training or in the little huddles in training? You know, you can gauge where the mood is and the energy of the group is and how hard lads are applying and working themselves. So, you know, I suppose recognising that and observing that in the first 24 or 48 hours after a game, where we feel the group is at and the mood and energy is at. And that's by asking questions around the group and just listening to informal chats and observing the training. And that'll give you an inkling whether you need to, you know, maybe challenge lads here on their application in a drill, or maybe give some lad a little jerk to get more out of the session, or maybe dial up the intensity of a drill to check is there complacency there, or lads working hard enough. And it's observing that throughout the week, both in informal conversations and formal conversation with the group, and recognising their body language and their application and their attitude to various tasks. And then you can kind of assess, are lads really approaching and attacking the challenge of the week? Or are they in a place where maybe they're avoiding things, or there's a bit of complacency coming in? And it's really just to assess that kind of mood and energy in the body language and the energy of the group.
Excellent answers there, Tony. Thanks very much. And I'll just stay with you, Tony Ogan. I'm going to hit the tree very quick on these next couple topics. But your favourite piece of tech at the minute, Tony Og, or something that's making your job really easy? Mightn't be a technical thing, but something that just makes your job really easy.
I find a voice recorder on my phone, Damien, is a really good way to record different things around visualization audios I'd send out to clients, be meditation and mindfulness exercises to help them with their attention and focus as well, and you know, create a relaxation response and recovery from training or work experiences that are causing stress for them. So in our busy world at the moment, that would be one big thing for me, is that people have actually space and time to practice things that recenters them and refocus them on important things and priorities in their life, and they're able to train their attention at different times on the right things.
It's an excellent answer, Tony Og. Just again, personally, with all our lives that are busy, you know, you'll get a brainwave just before you get into bed at night, and typing it into the notes on the phone, and even, as you say yourself, recording yourself giving feedback to a player and listen back to it and see what your twitches are and what your clicks is, and seeing is your message, what's going on in your brain, see is it actually going to have a desired effect on a player. So super answer there. Simon, anything that you find really useful that helps your job?
Yeah, I suppose, like, in terms of what we do, we put four angles of video up for every training session, and one of them is the drone. So if we can get a drone up there, it nearly negates the other three. It's all the coaches look at, it's all the players look at. It's incredible what you can see when you've got that bird's eye view. But when you're talking about it, it's something very simple along the lines of Tony. If you're talking about something everyone has access to, I think WhatsApp has totally changed everything that we do in terms of communication. So before, when a lad had to log into Huddle to look at clips, and maybe, you know, there's 4, 5, 10 clicks. We all know what guys this age are used to. They're used to kind of instant gratification in terms of they don't want to have to do a huge amount of work in order to get the nugget. So if a player texts me, I can send him a video clip on WhatsApp. You know, there's WhatsApp on your desktop, which you can just drag and drop video to, and bang, the player has it, and you've got a conversation going straight away. Even in units, you know, we'd have a forwards units group, WhatsApp chat, bang, video goes in there, instant communication, and you've got players having a conversation around what's needed there. So it's a really simple one, but it's WhatsApp has changed everything for us.
Yeah, great. Another super answer. And just for coaches there, particularly with underage teams, just talking to your children's officer about the consents for that it's a parent's number that's within the WhatsApp. It's not the player's own, as if they're under 18. And even on the drone, Simon, like, there's not a team in the country where at least one of them doesn't have a drone with a decent sort of a camera. And even if it's only 10 minutes of flight time and be able to get a clip, working on kickouts or set plays or whatever it might be, that facility is definitely there as well.
100%. In a rural club in Galway a couple of weeks ago, I brought them in to give a presentation, and I said the drone was the biggest game changer. By the time they came in for the presentation, they'd videoed a training session on a drone, because one of the lads used it to check on the cows. so he flew it down for their puck out session. So yeah, they're not as far fetched as they once were. You know, everyone has access to them at the minute.
Farmers are definitely the way to go. Kate, what makes your life easy?
Definitely my phone, like similar to what Simon was just saying, like WhatsApp has just been amazing because you can literally get anything you need to athletes through that. So my phone in general, like you've got your email on there, you've got the WhatsApp, and all means really of communication that I use with my athletes. So yeah, that's definitely my lifesaver.
2 quick questions, Kate. What gets your goat up? That's a country term. What annoys you?
No, I understand. I'm not that bad. Not when people don't listen. So I think we all have, I think definitely coming from a team perspective and just life in general, I think listening to one another, we can get things done a lot more effectively and efficiently. So having an open mind at whatever comes your way and being able to listen, and then you can throw your 2 cents in.
And the guilty pleasure?
Right now it's very random, but it's Modern Family. I've never watched TV, and they're 20 minutes on Netflix and give me an easy laugh. Yeah. Well, I haven't quite made it that far, but easy laughs, easy win, mindless, love it.
Great. Tony Og, what annoys you?
Punctuality, I'd say, Damien, would be the most important thing for me. If people say they're going to be there at a time and it's 15 or 20 minutes, I find it disrespectful, really, and something I'd be very strong on it and is important to me as a value.
We started this at 8 o'clock, Tony. You'll be glad to know. And your own guilty pleasure?
It's probably a chocolate chip cookie at the moment after a day's work.
Good lad.
Sorry, Kate.
No judgment, no judgment.
Look, going in there, Kate. He's in great shape. He deserves it. Simon, what gets your goat up?
It's every time we lose a game, which does happen a bit, and you get all the texts going, how did you not see that? How did you not know they were going to do that? It's even people in the shop you don't even know, telling you, I would have seen that myself. Sure, everyone knew they were going to do it. You're going, okay, but yeah, it's people telling me what I didn't see and I should have seen it.
Yeah, hindsight is a great thing, isn't it?
No, it's 2020.
Yeah. And the guilty pleasure, Simon?
Yeah. Singing in the car when I'm on my own, yeah. I won't tell you what I'm singing, but it's, I enjoy that little bit of time when I'm on my own on the way to work. 3 young kids here in the house, so yeah, roaring the top of my lungs in the car.
Good lad. Kate, we're going to do a little takeover here. We talked about it during the week.
Oh, yes.
Do you have the options? So
I do.
And Simon, Kate is going to take over this little section.
Oh, don't bother.
Are you ready? So I want your instant reaction. So I'm going to call out a few names, and then maybe Simon, if you want to give your first reaction or your instant reaction to the person I call out, and then Tony Og, if you wouldn't mind coming in with your instant reaction. Are we all on the same wavelength?
I'm going first, am I?
Yeah, sorry about you. Okay, Conor McGregor.
Gobshite.
Tony.
Trendsetter in his chosen field, but 4 retirements in what, three months or whatever. God above.
Staying current. Mary Lou McDonald, Simon.
Oh, she was like a runaway train until COVID, so she's been shafted, I think, more so by anyone than this disease.
Tony.
Strong presence.
Michael O'Leary, Simon.
Oh, he's definite renegade in his field. He's changed aviation.
Tony.
Yeah, I think I wonder, does a man sleep at all, the way he just seems to be constantly on, and I do worry about his health long term.
Joe Brolly.
I see someone there with a high intellect, but man, how much he craves the limelight, just some of the stuff he comes out with, I think it defies his intellect.
Yeah, I probably was on the fence with Joe, but then I saw an interview, I don't know, was it with Joe.e or something recently, and I found him a very interesting man, the amount of charity work he does behind the scenes, and both from kidney point of view and mental health, and how many lives he's probably helped through law as well. So I think there's 2 sides from probably the public persona, which is a bit of a laugh and a giggle, and then he's very serious on certain things as well. So I think he's interesting company anyway.
Yeah. Fair. Donald Trump.
I should have went second.
You always get shafted if you go first.
I would have given all the same answers as Tony. Trump, I don't know, he just comes across as a little bit deluded. He doesn't have a finger on the pulse from what we can see from far away, but the scary thing is he's probably going to walk another election if he goes to the polls, which is very frightening.
Yeah, it's just amazing that a country could vote in someone who's just intellectually and emotionally so stunted, it seems.
Questionable. Then Roy Keane, Simon.
I'm not often speechless, but he was the one guy when I met him. I was like the 4-year-old child in me came out. So yeah, I'd see him as a legend. In terms of the Civil War, I was very much a Keenite.
Yeah, big Man United fan as well, and I think no more than Joe Brolly, I think there's a side to Roy that's very humorous, and he doesn't take himself too seriously. And I think if you can, take some of his punches, he's a great character to be around.
Bono then, second from the last, you're nearly there.
Yeah, poor old Bono. I think he's a bit misunderstood, and no matter what he does in this country, he's going to be shafted. So half the people think he's whatever. But I'm a huge U2 fan, like I was a United fan, so I really like Bono.
Yeah, I didn't ever massively like their music, and probably didn't see enough interviews of Bono to see the real side of him, maybe. So yeah, I wouldn't be a massive fan.
Last but not least, Love Island.
I've never watched an episode, which people don't believe, but I can't give an opinion.
Yeah, I definitely haven't watched the full episode. I've seen clips here and there, but I suppose the conversations wouldn't do it for me.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks very much for that. Just final question for everybody. Kate, I'll start with you. 1 or 2 takeaways from the other 2 speakers, Tony Og and Simon, from tonight.
I think consistency is really, really important. So whatever message you're looking to get through, it's so important that the consistency comes with that. So that's from Tony, and then from Simon, I think it's really, really important to know, and I think it works for all our disciplines in terms of, for coaches, like to recognize what you actually want to get from, our expertise or what we can lend to the team. So similar to what I'll be saying to my athletes, like understanding your own needs is really, really important.
Thank you, Kate. Tony Og?
Yeah, from Simon's point of view, and having worked with him, I think it's, what wins us games, and that clarity that Simon brings on opposition and ourselves, and also, the ability to celebrate the wins and the progress that teams are making, and the power of video analysis for doing that. From a nutritional point of view, I think it's so important listening to Kate around the individual approach. Everyone has different lifestyles and different paces and different energies, so it's to, again, have that individual approach, and it's very much in my field as well. I can't be telling a player to go do visualization when he can't sleep at night, and what's the biggest win for him right now might be the smallest thing, and for another player, it might be visualization. So it's that individualized approach that Kate mentioned, I think is just so important to build that trust and rapport.
Thanks, Tony Og. And finally, Simon?
Yeah, what I'm seeing across, having worked with Tony and seeing like how good he is in front of a room, and Kate from what she's spoken about this evening, and basically what I would see is the most important thing in performance sport is it's a level of trust. So Kate's talked about having the trust of the athlete. Tony's mentioned trust a number of times. I think across the whole conversation this evening, the biggest takeaway from the other 2 would be having a level of trust that you can add, make the boat go faster in the same direction, or in a forward direction. So yeah, it's trust is the big takeaway.
Guys, thanks very much. Just for people still listening in there, I think this is definitely a webinar that we might want to listen back again. There's so many nuggets there throughout the last hour and 90 minutes in total. So this will be up on our website tomorrow morning, longfordgaa.ie, under coaching and then webinars. So you'll be able to get the link. And when things settle down, we have a lot more planned for June, and we'll all be back out in the field in July. but we'll start putting these up on YouTube and people can review them back throughout the winter when things get quiet again. So thanks everybody. I hope you keep safe. Again, thank you so much to Kate, Tony Og and Simon. Really knowledgeable people, and great to have you on board tonight. Slán everybody, and we talk to you soon.
See you guys.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Damien.
Bye.
Thanks, Simon.
Thanks,
See you, Kate.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Damien.